They tell you rain washes things clean, but out here, when the sky cracks open and the streets turn to black mirrors, it only brings what's been waiting in the dark closer to your door. I've lived through 3 nights where the downpour didn't just drown the town. It drowned the rules, the logic, the very idea that you're ever truly alone. What you're about to hear isn't folklore. It's not campfire fiction. These are the accounts of people who called 911, who locked their deadbolts, who watched their windows fog from the inside out as something moved just beyond the glass. And if you're listening to this on a night like tonight, with water drumming against your roof and the wind howling like it knows your name, don't turn off the light, don't look outside, and whatever you do, don't answer the door. I moved to Forks in late September of 2019, not because I loved the rain, but because I was running from it. Not the weather, but everything else. My divorce had finalized in July, my brokerage firm had downsized my department, and I'd spent 3 years sleeping on a couch that smelled like stale coffee and unresolved arguments. When my sister mentioned she was selling her late husband's cabin just outside town, I didn't ask about the roof. I didn't ask about the property taxes. I just wired the deposit, packed 2 suitcases, and drove north on US 101 until the pine trees swallowed the skyline and the sky turned the color of wet slate. Forks isn't a town that advertises itself. It's a place you end up in. The rain here doesn't fall, it settles. It's a constant, heavy presence, like a blanket that never quite dries. By October, the gutters were already overflowing, the moss had crept up the cedar siding, and the roads were slick with a thin film of pine needles and damp earth. I told myself I liked it. The quiet, the isolation, the way the fog rolled in off the Hoh River and muffled everything except the steady drumming on the tin roof. I bought a weather radio, stocked the pantry with canned goods and firewood, and started a routine that felt almost therapeutic. Wake up at 6, brew coffee, check the perimeter, work on the laptop. Walk down to the edge of the property line where the old logging trail faded into second-growth forest. Come back before dusk, lock the doors, listen to the rain. It was November 12th when I first heard the tapping. I was in the kitchen, wiping down the counter after dinner, when it started. A soft, rhythmic knock against the metal downspout on the east side of the cabin. Not the erratic ping of raindrops. This was deliberate. 3 taps. Pause. 3 taps. Pause. 3 taps. I froze, dishcloth in hand, and listened. The storm had been rolling in since late afternoon, a slow, heavy front that dropped the temperature into the low 40s and turned the driveway into a shallow creek. I told myself it was a branch, or a raccoon, or the wind catching a loose section of gutter. But branches don't tap in patterns. Raccoons don't keep time, and wind doesn't sound like knuckles on metal. I walked to the back porch, pushed, opened the screen door, and stepped into the rain. The cold hit me instantly, soaking through my flannel shirt. I peered down the length of the downspout. Nothing but water cascading into the gravel drainage bed. I followed it to the ground, crouched, and shined my phone flashlight along the base. Wet mud, pine needles, a single crow feather, no footprints, no disturbed earth. Just the relentless pour of water and the sound of my own breathing. I went back inside, dried off, and tried to forget it. But that night, as I lay in bed listening to the storm intensify, the tapping returned. Louder this time, closer to the window. 3 taps. Pause. 3 taps. I sat up, heart already pounding, and pressed my ear against the glass. The rhythm changed. It slowed, then it stopped. I waited 5 minutes. 10. 15. Nothing but rain. I told myself it was nothing. Old houses settle, metal expands and contracts, water pressure fluctuates. But the next evening, it happened again, and the next, and the next. By the 5th night, I'd started marking the times in a notebook. 8:14 p.m., 9:03 p.m., 10:47 p.m. Always during heavy rain, always exactly 3 taps. Always followed by silence. I called a local handyman, a guy named Dale who'd lived in Clallam County his whole life. He came over on a Thursday, boots caked in mud, coffee thermos in hand. I showed him the downspout, explained the tapping, asked if it could be a loose joint or a trapped animal. He listened, nodded, tapped it himself with a wrench and said, "Sounds solid, no hollow spots. If something's in there, it's not metal." He checked the roofline, cleared the leaves from the gutter, and told me to run water through it. I did. Nothing. Just smooth, uninterrupted flow. But the tapping didn't stop. It adapted. On November 24th, the storm hit with a vengeance. The National Weather Service issued a flood warning for the Quileute River Basin. Winds gusted to 40 miles an hour. Trees swayed like drunk men. And at exactly 11:11 p.m., the tapping changed. It wasn't 3 anymore. It was 4, then 5. Then a rapid, frantic series that sounded like fingers drumming against the pipe. I grabbed my flashlight, pulled on my boots, and went outside. The rain was coming down in sheets, stinging my face, soaking through my jacket in seconds. I shined the beam at the downspout and saw the footprints. They started at the edge of the gravel drainage bed, just beyond where the pipe emptied into the soil. 2 sets, bare, wet, leading toward the foundation, then vanishing against the cedar siding. I dropped to my knees, ignoring the cold, and pressed my gloved hand into the mud. The impressions were shallow, but unmistakable. Human-sized, bare soles. No tread pattern. I followed them with my light, tracing the path around the side of the cabin. They stopped at the basement window well. The glass was fogged from the inside. I wiped it with my sleeve. Nothing. Just darkness. I called the Clallam County Sheriff's non-emergency line. The dispatcher was calm, professional, asked for my address, my name, what I'd seen. I explained the footprints, the tapping, the timeline. She told me they'd log it. That storm season brought out stray dogs, trespassers, kids looking for shelter. She said if I felt unsafe, I could request a welfare check. I said I would if it happened again. She said they'd note it. I hung up. I didn't sleep. The next night, the power went out. It happened at 8:42 p.m. One moment the lamps were glowing. The next, everything went black. The fridge stopped humming. The weather radio clicked off mid-sentence. The only sound was the rain, heavier now, pounding the roof like fists. I fumbled for the emergency kit, found the headlamp, strapped it on, and walked to the fuse box in the hallway. I flipped the main breaker. Nothing. I checked the outdoor panel. The breaker hadn't tripped. It was a grid failure, common in storms. I knew that. I'd lived through blackouts before, but this one felt different. The silence after the hum of electricity died was too complete, too heavy, like the house was holding its breath. I lit a kerosene lamp, set it on the kitchen table, sat down, listened. At 9:17 p.m. the tapping returned, but it wasn't coming from the downspout anymore. It was inside the walls. 3 taps. Pause. 3 taps. Right behind the drywall in the living room. I stood up. The headlamp beam shook slightly as I walked toward the sound. I pressed my palm against the plaster. Cold, damp, and then faintly a vibration, like something was breathing on the other side. I stepped back. My pulse was in my throat. I grabbed a hammer from the garage, came back, and struck the wall once. The sound echoed through the cabin. The tapping stopped. I waited. 10 seconds. 20. Nothing. I told myself I was losing it. Stress, isolation, grief. The human mind looks for patterns in chaos. It's a survival mechanism. I'd read about it. I knew it. But knowing didn't stop my hands from shaking. It didn't stop me from checking the locks 3 times. It didn't stop me from sleeping with the kerosene lamp on the nightstand and a kitchen knife under the pillow. November 28th was when the voice came. The storm had been raging for 36 hours straight. The county issued a shelter-in-place advisory. Roads were closed. Cell service dropped to 1 bar, then none. I was sitting by the wood stove, reading a paperback I'd found on the shelf, when the radio crackled to life. Not my weather radio. The old ham set Dale had left behind, powered by a car battery I'd rigged up. It was dead for weeks. Now it was on, static. Then a voice. Can't get out. Water's rising. Please. If you can hear this. I'm in the old drainage, near the bridge. I froze. The voice was male. Young, breathless, terrified. I recognized it instantly. It was Tyler Vance. a kid who'd gone missing in 2014, hiking alone near the Solitude River. Search teams found his backpack. His phone. No body. The case went cold. I'd read the article in the Peninsula Daily News. I'd seen the flyers at the post office. And now his voice was coming through a dead radio in my living room. Cold. So cold. They're in the pipes. They tap when it rains. Don't go outside. Don't let it in. The transmission cut out. Static returned. I stared at the radio. My hands were numb. I grabbed the battery cable, yanked it from the terminals. The static died. I sat on the floor, back against the wall, breathing shallow, telling myself it was interference, a crossed frequency, a prank. But I knew the voice. I'd heard it on local news segments. I'd seen the photo of Tyler on the missing persons board at the Forks Library. And he'd been gone for 5 years. I didn't sleep that night. I sat by the window, watched the rain, listened to the house. At 3:14 a.m., the tapping started again, but this time, it wasn't in the walls. It was at the front door, 3 taps. Pause, 3 taps. Slow, deliberate. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I just stared at the door. The deadbolt was engaged. The chain was on. The peephole was clear. I waited. The tapping stopped. Then came a sound I'll never forget. A wet, dragging scrape, like something heavy being pulled across the porch boards. Then silence. I didn't open the door. I didn't call out. I just sat there until dawn. When the rain finally broke on December 1st, I drove into town. I went to the sheriff's office. I filed a formal report. I showed them my notebook. I played them a recording I'd made on my phone of the radio transmission. The deputy listened, nodded, took notes, and told me they'd look into it. He didn't look surprised. He just said, "Storm season does things to people, especially out here, the isolation, the weather." I've always believed that silence is a luxury. Out here in the Upper Peninsula, silence doesn't exist. Even on clear days, you hear the wind moving through the pines, the distant hum of a freight train on the Canadian National Line, the occasional crack of ice shifting on Lake Superior in winter. But when the rain comes, the sound changes. It doesn't just fill the air. It presses against you. It gets into your bones. And on November 17th, 2021, it brought something with it that I still can't explain. My name is Elias Vance. I'm a former marine radio operator, turned freelance weather consultant, turned part-time ham radio hobbyist. I moved to Marquette in 2018 after my contracting work in Detroit dried up. I bought a small A-frame on the edge of Lakeview Road, overlooking the bay, with a wraparound porch, a wood stove, and a direct line to the National Weather Service's backup frequency. I liked the isolation. I liked the predictability of the seasons. I liked knowing exactly how far a storm front was moving and what it would bring. I thought I understood the weather. I thought I understood the lake. I was wrong. The rain started at 4:30 p.m. Not a gentle shower, a cold, heavy, relentless downpour that turned the dirt road into mud and sent water cascading off the roof in thick sheets. The temperature dropped to 38 degrees. The barometer fell steadily. I logged it in my journal, noted the wind direction, checked the radar, expected it to pass by midnight. It didn't. By 7 p.m., the lake was churning. Whitecaps rolled toward shore. The sky was a solid wall of gray. I turned on the weather radio, set it to the no AA frequency, and let it hum in the background. Standard procedure. I brewed coffee, sat by the window, watched the water rise. At 8:12 p.m., the radio crackled. Repeat. Heavy rain warning remains in effect. Flash flood potential high. Avoid low-lying areas. Standard. Calm. Professional. I nodded, sipped my coffee, and kept watching the storm. At 8:47 p.m., the transmission cut out. Not a fade. A hard stop. Like someone pulled the plug. I checked the antenna. Clear. Checked the power. Stable. Checked the frequency. Still locked. I turned the dial slowly, scanning for other stations. Static. More static. Then, at 146,520 MHz, a local repeater I used for county emergency comms, I heard it. A voice, but not a broadcast, a conversation. "You hearing this?" Sounds like water in the walls. I think it's leaking. Frowned. That wasn't a dispatcher. That was a civilian. I grabbed my mic, pressed transmit. This is KV8R on Lakeview Road. Copy that. You experiencing interior flooding? Over. Silence. Then a whisper. It's not water. It's breathing. I sat up. My skin went cold. I pressed transmit again. Identify yourself. Location. Over. Static. Then a different voice. Older. Shaking. They're in the pipes. Been there since the 78 storm. Don't turn on the taps. Don't let it pool. It learns the shape of the house. I dropped the mic. My hands were trembling. I knew that frequency. It was monitored by the Marquette County Emergency Management Office. It was used for official traffic only. Unauthorized transmissions were logged and flagged. But this wasn't unauthorized. This was impossible. I checked my logs. No other signals. No cross-traffic. Just those two voices, fading in and out like they were broadcasting from inside a copper pipe. I grabbed my notebook, started writing down timestamps, frequencies, exact phrases. I told myself it was a prank. Kids with a scanner, ham operators messing with the band. But the tone was wrong. The pacing was wrong. There was no background noise, no room echo. Just dry, close, intimate speech, like the microphone was pressed against someone's lips. At 9:31 p.m., the power flickered. Once, twice, then died. The lights went out. The fridge stopped. The radio went silent. I lit a lantern, checked the breaker. Nothing tripped. I went to the window. The rain was coming down so hard I couldn't see the tree line. The lake was a black void. And then, through the glass, I saw it, a light on the water. Not a boat, not a buoy. A steady pale blue glow floating about 200 yards offshore. It didn't move with the waves. It hovered, pulsed, like something was breathing beneath it. I grabbed my binoculars, focused. The light shifted, split into 3, then 4, arranged in a loose circle. I lowered the glasses. My breath fogged. The window. I wiped it. Looked again. Gone. I sat on the floor, back against the wall, lantern at my feet. I told myself it was phosphorescence, algal bloom, reflection off a submerged wreck. Lake Superior is full of them, but I've studied the lake my whole life. I know what algae looks like. I know what shipwreck lights look like. This wasn't either. This was deliberate. This was watching. At 10:04 p.m., the radio turned on by itself. I hadn't touched it. The power was out. The battery backup was disconnected. But the dial was lit. The speaker was humming. And a voice was speaking, not over the air, from inside the cabinet. You're listening. Good. We've been waiting. The rain brings the old channels open. The pipes remember. The house remembers. Don't go outside. Don't open the doors. It's learning your voice. I stood up, backed away. The lantern cast long shadows on the walls. The voice wasn't coming through the speaker. It was echoing from the walls themselves. From the floorboards, from the vent near the ceiling. I grabbed a hammer, swung it at the radio. Glass shattered, plastic cracked. The voice stopped. I stood there, chest heaving, staring at the broken unit. Then I heard it from the kitchen sink. Slow, rhythmic drip, but not water. Something thicker, slower, like blood. I walked over, turned on the faucet. Nothing. I turned it off. The drip continued. I pressed my ear to the pipe, cold, vibrating, and then faintly, a whisper. Elias, you called us. Now we're here. I ran to the door, locked it, checked the deadbolt, checked the chain, checked the windows. All secure. I sat on the couch, pulled a blanket over my shoulders, told myself it was stress, sleep deprivation, the storm messing with the wiring. But I knew better. I've worked in emergency comms for 20 years. I know what interference sounds like. I know what feedback sounds like. This wasn't technical. This was intentional. At 11:22 p.m., the phone rang. Landline. I didn't even know it still worked. I picked it up. Hello? Static. Then a voice, familiar. Elias, it's Marquette County Dispatch. We're tracking a severe weather event in your sector. Are you safe? I exhaled. Relief. Yes, power's out. Radio's dead. But I'm secure. Copy that. We're seeing unusual atmospheric pressure drops in your area. Recommend staying indoors. Do not attempt to travel. Repeat, do not travel. Understood. Thanks. Elias? Yes? A pause. Long. Too long. Why did you call us? I froze. I didn't call you. You called me. Another pause. Then softly, the voice changed. We know. We're already inside. The line went dead. I dropped the phone, backed into the corner. My hands were shaking so hard I couldn't. Hold the blanket. I listened. The house was silent. Too silent. No rain on the roof, no wind in the trees. Just the slow, steady drip from the kitchen. I walked over, looked down the drain. Black water. Still. Then a bubble rose, popped, and the voice came back. You left the channel open. Now we're coming through. I didn't sleep. I didn't move. I just sat there until dawn. When the rain finally broke at 5:48 a.m., I grabbed my keys, drove to town, and went straight to the sheriff's office. I filed a report. I showed them my logs. I played them the recording I'd made on my phone. The deputy listened, nodded, took notes. Then he said something I'll never forget. Mr. Vance, in 1978, a severe storm hit this county. Flash floods. Power grid failure. Emergency comms went down for 6 hours. During that time, multiple residents reported hearing voices on dead lines, on weather radios, through plumbing. The official report cited atmospheric ionization and piezoelectric effect in old copper pipes, but the unofficial notes, they said something else. They said the storm opened channels that shouldn't be open, and that whatever was on the other side learned how to speak. I asked him if anyone had ever traced it. He said no. The equipment failed. The logs were lost. The witnesses moved away, or stopped talking. He said, out here the lake doesn't just give us water. It gives us echoes, and sometimes the echoes answer back. I went home, I packed my gear, I sold the house, I moved to Traverse City. I haven't touched a radio since, but I still hear it on rainy nights. When the wind shifts off the water, when the pressure drops. I hear it in the hum of the refrigerator, in the drip of the shower, in the static between stations on my car radio. And sometimes, when I'm alone, and the rain is heavy, and the lights flicker just right, I hear my name, not from outside, from inside the walls, from the pipes, from the space where the water remembers. And I know with absolute certainty that the storm didn't bring it here. It just reminded it how to knock. I bought the house on 4th Street in Eureka because it was cheap, not because it was beautiful, not because it had history, because the price was too low to ignore, and I needed a project to distract myself from a life that had quietly fallen apart. The listing called it a 1902 Queen Anne with original hardwoods, period moldings, and a detached carriage house. What it didn't mention was the damp, the smell of wet wool and rotting timber, the way the floors sloped toward them, center like a sinking ship, and the rain. My God, the rain. Eureka gets over 40 inches a year. It doesn't fall. It lingers. It soaks into the foundation. It climbs the walls. It waits. I moved in on October 3rd, 2020. I brought a toolkit, a space heater, a mattress on the floor, and a naive belief that I could fix anything with enough elbow grease and YouTube tutorials. I started in the basement. That was my first mistake. The basement wasn't a room. It was a labyrinth of exposed joists, brick piers, and dirt floors that had been partially paved with cracked concrete decades ago. Water pooled in the corners, not from leaks, from the ground itself. I set up a dehumidifier, ran extension cords, laid down tarps. I was 3 days into stripping wallpaper when I found the first journal. It was wedged between 2 floor joists, wrapped in oilcloth, tied with twine. The cover was leather, cracked, stained with something dark. I opened it carefully. The handwriting was precise, Victorian, but the words were anything but elegant. October 14th, 1911. The rain has not ceased for 9 days. The walls weep. I hear it in the pipes. A tapping, like fingers, Like teeth, I have sealed the cellar. I have plugged the drains. It does not matter. It comes through the stone. It learns the shape of the house. I will not sleep tonight. I will not answer the door. If you are reading this, do not trust the water. It remembers. It waits. It taps. I closed the journal. My hands were cold. I told myself it was a hoax, a prank left by a previous owner, a creative writing exercise. But the ink was faded. The paper was brittle. The handwriting matched the census records for a man named Arthur Pendleton, who owned the house from 1898 to 1914, and Arthur Pendleton disappeared in November of 1911. Official cause, presumed drowned in Humboldt Bay. Body never recovered. Put the journal in a plastic bin, locked it in my truck, told myself I'd finish the basement, sell the house, and forget it. But the rain had other plans. On October 18th, the storm hit. It wasn't forecasted, it just arrived, a Pacific frontal system that dumped 6 inches in 12 hours. The gutters overflowed, the driveway became a river, and at 9:33 p.m. the dripping started, not from the ceiling, from the walls. I was in the kitchen wiping down counters when I heard it. A slow, rhythmic drop, plink, pause, plink, pause. I followed it to the hallway. The wallpaper was peeling, the plaster was damp, and behind it I could see it, a dark stain, spreading. I pressed my hand against it, cold, wet, and then, faintly, a vibration, like something was moving behind the drywall. I grabbed a utility knife, cut a small slit, and shined my flashlight inside. Nothing but darkness. And water. A lot of it. Pooling between the studs. I called a plumber. He came the next day, inspected the pipes, checked the main line, and told me the house had original cast iron drainage. No PVC, no modern venting. He said the walls were sweating due to condensation and poor insulation. He said to install a vapor barrier. I said I would. He said good luck. He left. That night, the dripping changed. It wasn't random anymore. It was rhythmic. 3 drops. Pause. 3 drops. Exactly, like the journal described. I sat on the floor, listened, counted, waited. At 11:47 p.m., it stopped. Then came a sound I'll never forget. A wet, sliding scrape, like something heavy dragging across the floorboards above me. I grabbed a flashlight, ran upstairs, checked. Every room, empty, locked, undisturbed. But the hallway mirror was fogged, and on it, written in condensation, were 3 words. It remembers you. I wiped it away. Told myself it was a draft, a temperature shift. But I knew better. I'd read the journal, I'd seen the records, and I knew, with a sinking certainty, that I wasn't alone in this house. The next day, I called the Humboldt County Historical Society. I asked about Arthur Pendleton. They sent me a file, photographs, letters, police reports, and a single page from a local newspaper dated November 1911. Local man vanishes amid unprecedented rainfall. Authorities search bay, creek, and drainage. Tunnels, no trace found. Neighbors report strange tapping sounds prior to disappearance. House condemned, never reopened. I stared at the page. My hands were shaking. I called a contractor, asked him to inspect the basement walls. He came over, tapped the plaster, listened, and said, "There's a void behind here. Big. Maybe 2 feet wide. Could be an old coal chute. Could be a forgotten root cellar. Could be collapsed. You want me to cut it open?" I said yes. He cut a 6-foot section of drywall, revealed a narrow space between the foundation and the interior wall. Dark, damp, filled with debris, old newspapers, rusted nails. And at the back, a wooden door. Rotting, padlocked. I shined my light through the crack. Saw steps, leading down. I didn't open it. I told the contractor to seal it. He said he would. I paid him. He left. That night, the rain returned, heavier, colder. And at 10:11 p.m., the door in the wall opened. I didn't hear it. I felt it. A shift in air pressure, a draft, a smell of wet stone and copper. I walked to the hallway. The drywall was torn. The door was ajar. Dark stairs descended into blackness. I stood at the edge, listened. Nothing but rain. And then from below, a voice. "You came back. I knew you would. The rain brings the old ones home." I dropped to my knees. My breath caught. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I just stared into the dark, and then, slowly, something emerged. Not a figure, not a shadow, a sound, the drip, but louder, closer, rhythmic. 3 drops. Pause. 3 drops. And with each drop, the temperature fell. The air grew heavier. The walls seemed to breathe. I backed away, closed the door, locked it, pushed a bookshelf against it, sat on the floor, waited for morning. When the sun finally rose, I called the police. I showed them the journal. I showed them the file. I showed them the door. They sent an officer. He inspected the space, took photos, logged the evidence. Then he said, "Mr. Hayes, houses this old have secrets. Basements flood. Walls crack. Voices echo. It's physics, not ghosts. You're stressed. You're tired. You're seeing patterns in noise. Pack your things, leave. Let the county handle the structural assessment." I didn't argue. I packed. I drove out of town. I haven't been back since, but I still have the journal. I still have the photos. And on rainy nights, when the wind howls off the Pacific and the gutters overflow, I still hear it. 3 drops. Pause. 3 drops. Not from a house. From my own apartment. From the bathroom tile. From the space behind the mirror. And sometimes, when the rain is heavy enough, I swear I see it, written in condensation on the glass. It remembers you. I don't know what's in the walls of that house. I don't know if Arthur Pendleton is alive. I don't know if the tapping is a ghost, an animal, a trick of acoustics or something, older than the town itself. But I know this: when the sky opens up in Eureka, California, the rain doesn't just fall, it remembers. And if you stay long enough, it learns how to knock back.